Morning and welcome to the latest edition of the Social Housing Roundtable. Great to have you with us today if you're watching the recording. Today's is going to be looking at the energy crisis, not just what we can be doing to support tenants, but also supporting our staff. Looking forward to today's. It should be a really, really interesting discussion. Here's the recording and I hope you enjoy. Thanks very much. So as I say, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining today's Social Housing Roundtable on the energy crisis, what we can be doing to support tenants, but also what we can be doing to support our staff, because it's just as important, obviously, that we're looking after each other and looking after everything that's going on really in the sector at the moment. Those who have not liaised, but put it up. Just going to mute in a second because I think it's background noise. Those who are new faces or that I haven't worked with before, my name is Matthew Baird. I've been working in the social housing recruitment space now for 2.5 years. I set up my own business just over a year ago in February of 2021. Yeah, that's correct. My year's confused, you know what the pandemic's like. With the idea that I try and do things a bit differently, namely that I could try and give back a little bit to the social housing sector and use my platform and use the voice that I've got to bring people together to share ideas and improve best practice. That said, I'm still doing recruitment on the side, so if anyone does need any recruitment support, please do reach out. That's the end of the recruitment plug, I promise. Now, I've got speaking to actually Daniel Bebbington, who's with me today on my screen. He's just beneath me, so I don't know where he is on yours. A while ago, because we ran a round table back at the beginning of about March time, which was looking at furniture poverty and fuel poverty. Really, really interesting discussion, very, very poignant at the time. And at the time when we were having those conversations, we wanted to make sure we were also talking about energy, but the hour and a bit that we had just completely got away from us. So I'm hoping today we can resolve that. Now, obviously, since then, prices have hiked more than ever and are going to continue to do so again in October. Which is a lot closer, I think, than we could possibly imagine. The fact we're nearly halfway through the year already, I think, is frightening to many, never mind those who are keeping that October deadline in mind. So I wanted to bring people together today, and as I said at the beginning of the intro, usually when we run these roundtables, there's someone coming in with a particular expertise that knows how to resolve a particular problem and goes, right, this is the solution, and away we go, and then people ask questions. There isn't a one solution fits all for this, and I think we're all very aware of that. And I think it was really important today that when we brought people together, it was an idea of what are different providers doing, what ideas have people found are working or not working, are there solutions or innovations that people have had that they're seeing as being successful, and if there are, excellent, let's share them about, and if there aren't, what questions do people have for other providers to see what's going on. So with that, I'm actually going to introduce Daniel straight off the bat. He's going to love the fact that I brought him in straight away. I saw your face there, Dan. Because evidently you work exclusively in this space, Dan. You know, you are working within energy and within social housing in terms of saving money for tenants and looking at alternative methods. So do you want to kind of go through kind of a brief overview of the conversation that we had, and I guess why you wanted to bring this up today and what kind of questions maybe you have for the group?
Okay, so yeah, hi, I'm Dan Bebbington, Debt and Energy Manager at the Wrekin Housing Group. So my provision up until last month has predominantly been debt, and I've been looking after our debt advice service, but then I've taken on the challenge of energy now. I do come from a utility background, but not an energy background, it's water. So it's very new, it's very exciting, but obviously it's a very challenging time. So I thought instead of creating the wheel, I'd see if anyone's got any expertise out there and see what other social housing providers are doing, hence the reason for having a chat with Matt, because he leads these wonderful roundtable discussions. So yeah, I was hoping we could all share best practice and just have conversations about what each of us have got, what plans we're doing, and so on and so forth.
And what's the biggest challenge you're finding at the moment, Dan? Kind of, I know, like you say, it's a new initiative almost. It's been brought forward by the business, but what do you see at the moment is like the biggest stuff?
I suppose people not having enough income to pay everything. That's the biggest issue, and I feel that we're just putting sticking plastics on it at the moment by just offering sort of vouchers via the Hacked redress schemes. So it's what a lot sort of long term things that people, what plans they've got and so on, as opposed to just like short term sort of impactful stuff. But we need more meaningful stuff, that's really going to sort of make a difference, I suppose, and it's going to help people long term.
Brilliant. And as I say, it was I don't know, I think when we first started having that conversation, it was really, I found it very inspiring in terms of saying, well, it's great to see at least a business stepping forward and going, we're going to recruit someone, or we're going to have someone exclusively in this role. We're going to have someone looking at this. And I think that is in itself a step forward and something that we need to see more of. If anyone is new to the roundtables, please feel free at any time to use, you can use the chat function if you don't actually want to come into the conversation itself. I will be monitoring that and bringing conversations in. If you want to physically raise a hand, which I think Andrea might be doing, I'm not sure, then please feel free to do so, or by all means use the reactions tab at the bottom of the screen and you can raise your hand and I will bring you in as the conversation flows, really. Mike, brilliant. So you said that you created some slides for Bromford. Just while we're starting kind of the conversation going, Mike, you have to come in and kind of talk about what a couple of those involve.
Yeah. Thanks again for the invite, Matt. It's really useful.
I know we talked about this as well, so I'm really
come
along today.
So it's So I've been doing a little bit of work probably for about 3 months now, and that started off around the issues around the energy increases and how that's going to impact, but also that is connected to lots of other strategies and KPIs that a lot of housing association colleagues on here will be akin to. So things like moving SAP to C, before 2030, and the impacts that potentially can have on a customer, but both positive and negative. So I've been doing a little bit. It started off, I was starting to look at the probably more negative impacts of doing some retrofitting and how that's affecting customers around energy consumption, energy bills, but also moving into property condition and condensation, damp and mold. And then I started looking at, well, what else is going to affect a customer, not just now, but in October. So we looked at cost of living in general. And I started pulling some slides together around the impacts of what will happen when the cost of living kind of comes into force later into this year, and describing the cost of living generally for for a general kind of run-of-the-mill person. The government saying, well, it's going to be around 7 or 8%. I actually think it'd be more like 15% for somebody who's on benefit, and staple foods going up quite significantly, and then we started linking in things like Brexit and then Russia, Ukraine, and the impacts of the economy, what's going to happen into next year. So in general, doesn't look great, and I think there's going to be some organisations that are going to have to realign their debt levels, because I think there's going to be a lot of people going into arrears, and there'll be, if you have a mantra in your organisation to evict, we don't at Bromford. But again, that's going to be quite an impact in across the sector. So been doing lots of work in the background, and of course I want to say data is king, because it always is. So we've been pulling some reports together now, looking at potential areas of where we'll move into social deprivation earlier. So been working with the NHS. We're going to try to bring them into certain areas of where we think these areas of social deprivation will happen into next year. So yeah, lots of data. So we've looked very high level. We've looked at kind of income, expenditure, type of property they live in, customers live in, type of heating, and investment as well. And then, is there a solution? No, there isn't. And your colleagues say that, Dan was saying, Trussell Trust, brilliant. I wrote to the Trussell Trust and said, you do an absolutely fantastic job. Problem is, how are customers going to cook it? Because they're going to have no energy, because I'm not going to turn anything on. So I've been working on some initiatives of how, and I've got an appointment this afternoon to see how we can do it. So I'm looking at an energy bank now, where people potentially we can gift energy to people who are in hardship. So people who've got PV panels or batteries, actually, rather than selling it back to the grid at 5p, which is a pittance compared to what you used to get, why couldn't you gift a kilowatt of energy to somebody? So I'm looking at a social kind of impact fund around energy now. So once the data becomes,
where's that being drawn from? What's that? Like I said, it sounds like a great idea, but where's that kind of being sourced from? Or is it in its very early stages?
very early stages. I'm meeting a provider this afternoon because again they're very socially ethic organisation. They want to try, and they work in the energy sector, and they know this is going to impact a lot of people, certainly in rural areas, but of course obviously impacting onto urban. So we're kind of looking at a risk factor as well on the data that we think occupiers will do different things differently. So we think that people will start opening fireplaces back up to heat in the winter. We're predicting that winter death mortality rates will increase by about 20 to 30% in more elderly people, because they'll probably just try to keep warm by staying in bed and not great. So we've been trying to do some very high level assumptions, but again, Dan, I agree that there isn't a quick solution out of this. We're very much looking at grant, but there's not going to be enough grant about. And if there is enough grant, we'll all be chasing the same grant. And so that'll get exhausted. Trussell Trust are telling us they've not got or they won't have enough food because people will be cutting back themselves when the energy increases go in October again. So it's not looking great. And then, obviously outcomes of ASB going up into communities, theft will start going up. So there is going to be some big rolling kind of issues we think are coming into the sector over the next 12 months. So we're trying to use data to get ahead of the game. And Bromford having 46,000 homes, we're trying to see what that top quartile will look like, the top right hand bit of who's the highest and most vulnerable customer group, and what are we going to do to support that high area of group, because we're not going to be able to help everybody, but we want to make sure that we hit those most highest and most vulnerable, and then probably signpost others to areas of trying to sort out energy bills. But again, those customers in social housing really going to be affected, all on prepayment meters. Their daily standing charge is absolutely astronomical and will continue to be. And that the variable energy costs haven't gone up significantly. It's the daily standing charges that are going to cripple everybody. So yeah, so that's what we're doing at Bromford, and I can keep you posted.
Thanks, Mike. I really look forward to getting some of that through, and I think it'll be interesting to hear more about what you're doing with this. So there's a background somewhere, but with the energy side of this partnership with a potential energy provider, it'll also be interesting. I want to ask the question. I'm going to bring Dan in first just to respond to a couple of points there, but I think it's also going to be interesting that most housing providers here, I imagine, are going to be putting rents up this year. I think after years of everything going on, rents are going to go up, and they're going to go up considerably. So how are we going to factor that in? Dan, do come in, and as I say, as you'll see there, Dan's and the reaction, the hand action. If you want to join in, please do. And over to you.
No, that's really interesting. Thanks, Mike. I know that obviously you rely on a lot of data. So have you managed to capture like your most vulnerable tenants? Have you how have you obtained all that data? Because that's one of sort of the things that I've been tasked with. So is it? Have you got information on what people are using, stuff like Switchy? Have you got?
Yeah. So what we've tended to do at the beginning is obviously use our data that we've got in our system. So if customers advisors they are disabled, then we'll know that. And then what we're slightly unique in Bromford, that we have neighbourhood coaches. So we don't have a housing management approach as a standard kind of RP does. We have that quite low. So, there's one colleague out on the patch. They have around between 180 properties to manage. So we pretty kind of have a lot of intensive relationship with customers. So they should know the majority of their customers, but we're relying on data. So asset data out of systems, customer data, housing benefit data, universal credit data. And then I've been working with, I'm just engaging now and kind of shared some information with the Clinical Care Commissioning Group in Gloucestershire, just to see what they've got, because they've got some really good data on those residents who are affected by health. Now it's only at postcode level, but again, that gives us enough data to kind of pinpoint and maybe do so a little bit more intrusive management, because the NHS are going to be the one that get hits in the winter. They're going to get admissions, a lot more admissions than they've had before. So we're trying to beat that and see how the NHS can interact and intervene in some areas, because we're expecting. The problem is I think we're going to see an increase in repairs. I think we're going to see a huge increase in disrepair claims. Because I think, you know, the no win no fee solicitors are kind of come out the woodwork to support some customers, and of course, what do they want? They want some money to support themselves. So I think there's going to be a lot more claims around condensation, damp and mold, property condition. Complaints will go up, repairs will go up, and investment requests will go up. But just around energy, I think, you know, I've got a leaky window, fix it, are going to become more prevalent. So how do we get ahead of the game, and how do we try to support customers rather than it being a more reactive? But I haven't got an answer for everything, and you know, so
No,
we're
Mark,
doing
I think
a
it's
very
really
short
interesting.
snap.
No, look, really appreciate it. And actually, Marie Jenkins, who is with us today and will be a familiar face to those who've been on a number of the roundtables, has said that she's interested to hear whether housing associations are looking exactly what you said and looking at the stock condition surveys and have any planned programs specifically to improve energy efficiency. Is anybody looking at this at the moment? Is anybody looking at their stock conditioning already and kind of saying, actually, energy efficient wise, we know we're behind, but we're putting a plan in to try and get ahead of the game on that? Has anyone got anything that they can share around that at all?
I mean, we have, yeah. I don't want to keep talking, but yeah, we're doing that. But yeah, I'm also looking at some funding. But again, you know, the thing is, Marie, there's only so many contractors out there, and you know, they've just released the SHDF Wave 2 funding now. That's just going to kind of wipe loads of things out the market. It is a supply and demand area. So, of course, every organisation will be trying to lift their SAP rating. So, I'm not convinced it's some of the methodology is correct, and I'm challenging internally Bromford of what our approach is around past 35, because some components we're putting in are causing customers more outgoing, and I'm trying to battle that at the moment internally. Is that the right approach?
Brilliant. Well, Andrea, let me bring you in, and then I'm going to bring in Jay Messenger. Sorry, Jay, I don't know in terms of first names there, but yeah, Andrea, let me bring you in, or Andrea, sorry.
Andrea, hiya. So yeah, we have been successful with wave 1 of the Sustainable Housing Decarbonisation Fund, and are looking to submit a wave 2, and that obviously will help us sort of help heat stay in the buildings and stuff. But we're also looking at a bit of a trial campaign around areas that we've got high numbers of arrears, and you know, not in terms of just fuel poverty, more a money situation. So it ties in with what we were saying earlier on. It's not just fuel. It's, you know, you can't reduce how much your fuel costs. You can use less if possible, but you can't reduce the unit. So yeah, we're looking at sort of ways we can make sure that people are getting, you know, in receipt of all the benefits that they're entitled to, maximising their income, looking at ways with, you know, in that sort of, the approach is going to be bespoke to individuals. So we've got, we haven't done it yet, we've got dates identified. We're going to send postcards out to all of those customers who live in the areas that we've identified, telling them that we're going to sort of hit the ground. We're going to knock on doors, we're going to offer appointments for people to come in, spend time with our specialist staff, just Money Matters team, and just make sure that, you know, people have got everything that they need, everything that we can help them with. And then we're going to have some sort of really robust monitoring and evaluation processes in, just so we can really identify the impact of that. So, you know, that is alongside our sort of decarbonisation strategy and the work that we're already doing towards that. But yeah, it's just sort of being innovative, I guess, and figuring out other ways that we can help people. Really like the PV project. So I'd be excited to hear more about that. I know it's in its infancy. But yeah, we've got a lot of PV. So if there was any way of harvesting excess to redistribute, I think that's a really good idea. So yeah, that's just from me.
No, really appreciate it. And I think it's interesting when you talk there about the fact that, you know, one of the key things there for you has been getting back on the ground, because I think it's something we did very, very well as a sector at the beginning of lockdown. First lockdown, everybody found a way to kind of get in touch with every single tenant. You knew what was going on, you knew where the problems were, you knew people's isolation. I feel we've kind of taken a bit of a step back from that again. So is that something that, you know, from the initial, I appreciate I'm firing a question back at you here, but is it something that you feel from the initial kind of, I know it hasn't happened yet, has it actually? So you're sending out the postcards and things to come, but do you feel like you've already got the data you need, or do you feel like that's slipped behind for like a lot of housing associations who feel that maybe the foot were taken, I was going to say off the gas, and actually it's probably a weird pun to use on a topic such as this one, to be honest.
We have got some data, so and we've got sort of GIS facilities as well. So we've mapped those areas that have got really high arrears, and that's the areas that we're targeting. So clearly those customers are already struggling financially, and you know, quite often it's not just for one reason. So that's why we're sort of putting this approach in, and we don't know what we're going to find necessarily. We've got an idea, I suppose, but that sort of tailored service and you know, strong referral pathways to signpost people on areas that they'll need to go to, and then going back and checking that it's happened and it's worked and what the outcome has been. So we've got data around arrears, and we
I think
do
it'll be really
good
interesting.
customer insights.
And as you say, that's gonna roll on, because suddenly you're gonna have people in arrears who've never been in arrears before.
Yeah,
I think actually for a lot of customers in social housing, that's going to get very concerning, because they've done for years so well at that.
and part of it as well is also sort of, although we don't want to sort of bombard people with various different teams, because you know, that's why we're going to have these referral pathways in place, but speaking to other partners, we're going to speak to Northumbrian Water and see if there's any key information that they want us to give out while we're already speaking to our customers. We're going to make sure that we've got really good information about sort of, I know you're not really allowed to say behaviour changes in behaviour, you know, that people can adopt at home and to sort of help themselves as well. So we're just going to make sure that, you know, we really use it as a, you know, an opportunity to cascade information as well, and refer people onto partner services where possible, where appropriate.
I think that's brilliant. And like, as I say, if there's one thing that comes out today, is the fact that businesses go, you know, what we have to do is get back in touch with our customers and really know every single person again. I think sometimes that's some of the particular challenge for some of the larger organisations, and evidently we see that in the news, but I really appreciate that. We've had a message there from Dan Welch, Orbit. He said, hi all at Orbit, we have 875 properties on private electricity charges. This means those residents cannot get the warm home discount and the £400 affordability grant. Interested in this, if this is an issue at the housing association. I'm going to fly back to that in a second, Dan, but first thing I'm going to bring in Jay Messenger. Apologies, Jay, don't know your first name, so nice to have you with us.
No problem. It's Julia Messenger. I'm from Sage Homes. I think you know Angelique, who forwarded the invite to myself.
I do, yes. When said that, I was like, oh, right, okay.
Yeah, it was just really, well, firstly, to echo what Andrea was just saying there, I know some of the welfare benefits team are on the call as well today from Sage. So I think that's something which is we want to prioritise, is about customer support and how we get that information to customers, and making sure that we're partnering with people who can also give their expert advice as well, sort of energy advice, and then I guess eventually thinking whether that's something we should bring in-house or not, but for now we're working with partners for that kind of aspect. But it was really just to again pick up on something Mike was saying there around the solar panels, because we're in a very fortunate position where we've got EPC A and B. 97% of our properties are EPC A and B, which means that they're pretty energy efficient, but we're still very conscious about actually how can we help our customers further with the energy crisis which is going on. And one of the things we're looking at is whether we can do solar rollout. I think what we're struggling with is the financing side behind that, in terms of you do a fewer customers, but actually we could then have a bit more control about whether we charge out, or even if we gift it, or whether we work with a partner organisation who effectively pay for the solar, but we could reach many more customers. But then there'd be a sort of power purchase agreement where they pay in. It would be less than the sort of standard rate, but actually so there would be some saving, but you know, it's maybe not having quite the impact we wanted. So I'd just be interested in hearing a little bit more from Mike, if he is okay to share on where they're looking at.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because as you say, it's how do you find that balance? I know I was reading something on Inside Housing. There was a really interesting point. I was reading it before I came on today. It was about last month. It was Nick Atkin from Yorkshire Housing, and he was saying exactly that. Part of the issue is that not enough homes being built with the solar. So how do we trying to work backwards is always difficult. Mike, do you have any points to make regarding that for Julia?
Well, first of all, well done for getting some PV on, because you must have funded it yourself, because there is no grant funding out for PV, and I think that's one of my frustrations in the sector, that the government is about fabric first and insulate to an inch of our life, which then obviously brings in problems around ventilation, which a lot of organisations are not doing. Therefore, we end up with condensation, damp and mould, which is another poor outcome for a customer. Just with regards to the PV generation, it is a think tank that we're doing at the moment, and it was a kind of an entrepreneur guy I work with who he creates and builds big solar farms, 50 meg solar farms, and I'm going out this afternoon to see how we can do this. And what I would always say, the more the merrier if we can do this, and maybe bring someone like Octopus in to facilitate some of this as well. So I've just been on another call where there's an Octopus representative there, so I've dropped them a line today, because I think it's going to be vitally important around, we can do it at Trussell Trust level, if as organisations, or the large supermarkets can donate food, but we can't donate energy. Well, why shouldn't we be able to donate energy if there are some areas that, as a businesses or even those ethically minded individuals, should be able to donate some energy? So all I would say to you at the moment is watch this space, and do feel free to drop me an email, because I think if we in the sector, and this is why I like working with Matt, because I think more voices, more people listen, and I'd like to be able to push this, because I think there is going to be some real issues if we get a really cold snap this winter. That there there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be in a lot of trouble, I think. So yeah, feel free. I'm quite happy to share my email address with Matt, and then when we progress this, because I'm not an SME in this, and if there is somebody out in the energy world that is, well then let's consolidate and bring something, because I think it'll make a big difference to customers' lives.
Agreed, Mike, and I think it's as I say, the whole point in these roundtables, why they first came about, was to try and find something that a business was doing or trying or thinking about, to see whether or not we could then get new people involved with a new idea. And as you say, the more voices we can have on something, the better. I am going to dive back to Dan's point earlier. Obviously, I'm hoping you were able to think about it. I'm not sure if anybody's had a thought, but yeah, Dan, I've seen you come off mute. So please, bring about the idea of where this came about from.
Yeah, thank you. So I've recently joined Orbit, week 3 for me. So I'm the energy lead. So I'm just trying to understand what we're already doing as a business.
Congrats on the new job.
Thank you. But one of the problems, or early problems, we've got these properties where they pay us for the electricity, basically. So we've got a commercial contract with SSE, and then the residents pay us for the energy that they're using. Few challenges, so they can't get warm home discount because they don't have a domestic supply. It also means they're not going to get this £400 from the government as well. And the unit rates they're paying, because it's on a commercial contract and not a particularly good one, in truth, the unit rates are a lot higher than the price cap at the moment. So they really are some of our most vulnerable residents, but they are paying a premium for the electric they're using, and they are going to miss out on all of these grants that the Chancellor's announced. What I'm trying to understand is whether people have the same problem, if they do, what they're doing about it. And one bit of skills gap for me really is whether there even is a possibility of getting them domestic electric meters. Might be a difficult process, but what might be involved in doing that? So yeah, any help with that side of things?
Cheers, Dan. I mean, if anyone has got that, please raise your hand up. I'm just going to read out another point, but I'd love somebody to jump in on that. Joe Simcox has just put in the chat there that one point has just become apparent to me, going back to a point earlier on repairs impact, and taking Dan's comment. If we do get a cold spell, we need to consider how we provide temporary heaters in terms of heating failures and impact on energy costs. Show, that's probably a whole nother. As you say, it's never spiraling thing, but it's these things that people don't think about. Jonathan, great to have you with us. Please do jump in.
I was just on Dan's point, really. I don't know whether it's an answer or possible, but where I used to work, we had a similar problem around service charges, and we had a commercial contract. And I think this year from April, the service charges on gas and electric went up by 100%. So the organisation found themselves having to cap those increases because they just wouldn't be affordable for customers. But we did have a couple of schemes that had, I think they were called flow meters in each individual property. so that although it was a communal supply going to the area, each unit had a flow meter installed within the property, so that each person could see how much they were using individually within their own flat. So it didn't help with communal costs, but it did mean they could get more accurate bills. The downside of that was that we had to do the individual billing for the flow rate meters. So we had two schemes where each quarter we had to do the energy bills for them, but it did mean they were paying what they'd used rather than just paying everyone else's share of the energy.
Where was this at, John? Then just interesting to kind of have an idea of the kind of.
This was Castles and Coasts, which is sort of based in sort of northwest and northeast.
Yes.
So I'm at Broadacres Housing Association now, which is North Yorkshire. Kind of just jumping in on the conversations around energy, it's really difficult to kind of totally agree with Mike's comments. I think we're kind of shielded from the impact a little bit at the minute because of the warmer weather, and people just aren't using it. I think come autumn, winter, we're going to be really, really struggling. We've increased our customer support fund by 500%, basically to try and help customers, but it is very much a stick and plaster because we're kind of giving them money to top up their, we're giving them energy vouchers to top up their prepayment meters, but it's a very, very difficult thing because are they going to just keep coming back to us every time that they need some more energy on their meter, because we know that they know we're there and we can help, but it's going to be really tough. I think something needs to be done, and I think we need to be shouting a little bit louder in the housing sector about the struggles that we're having. Because basically, I totally get the maximising income and things like that, and it is going to work where people aren't getting all the benefits they are, but a lot of people, they are getting all that they're entitled to, and there just isn't enough money to go around, unfortunately.
I agreed with you, and I think it's going to be an interesting one, certainly, I think, as you say, later in the year. But even now, you're hearing people going, we're struggling or whatever else, but you're also hearing staff saying exactly the same thing, going, this is getting more and more expensive. And actually, I was speaking to a client, I was away on annual leave last week, just before I went away. And one of the things they're already making sure they've got, because evidently a lot of offices changed, you're finding offices these days don't have as many people in them. They're expecting, if we get a cold snap this winter, to everyone flood to the offices, because it's going to be cheaper for people to drive into work and be there 5 days a week than it is to heat their homes and work from home for 5 days a week. And that's a whole nother balance to look at, and kind of going, actually, you know what are going to be the costs to the business, because the cost of business in that regard then are going to increase, etc., etc. Marie is in the group there. Smart meters are a great way to enable customers to understand their usage, and like Andrea said, it helps to change behaviours. Completely agree. Evidently, I think that's a problem that John is going to have at Orbit, because evidently they don't have because energy is used a different way there. And Ollie Gray, great to have you with us, Ollie. I'm just trying to find you in the done that without the thing on just today. Dan's point, Charis manages funding on behalf of the energy sector, housing associations and charities. We've managed a park home scheme to help residents living in park homes where they don't have a direct relationship with the energy supplier. I wonder if this is something that could be explored. Might be something to reach out to. Ollie, I might get you to jump in a moment to elaborate on that a little bit if you'd be happy to. Mike, are there any organisations giving any customer advice about the £650 payment the government are offering? Is this the loan, or is this the grant, or is this the interesting? And then Dan has put, Mike, I'm just putting together a comms piece for our residents on the affordability grant. Yeah, Mike, is that the loan, or is that the?
Yeah, well,
loan?
it's just 650. It was a £650 payment that the government. There's a couple of things I think we've been slow in the sector. So the £150 coming back on the council tax rebate. Nobody proactively said to occupiers, put that away because your energy is going to go up. So we missed it. We missed it at Bromford, quite frustrating. And then, of course, the government then announced that they're going to issue, to 8 million households, £650 can be paid in 2 payments, 325. What's that going to look like? Is that going to take them out of fuel poverty? We have no idea. I think
But as you say, if that's going directly, but also if that's going directly to the resident, then there's that education piece, isn't there, about making sure that this is for energy, because you're not going to afford it otherwise. And that's always difficult whenever you're giving those who are already struggling, really struggling, kind of new funds, etc. Yeah. Try and say, well, don't spend it is very difficult.
Yeah. So yeah, so if anybody's got anything, we're putting something together. We're putting a number of streams of comms together now. But again, you know, leafleting people, comms in, does it really work? You know, has anybody got any innovative ways of doing that comms piece? You know, I'd be really interested. I'm quite happy to share what we'll be putting together. You know, we've got a strategy, a 3-month hit and a 6-month hit. You know, we're saying we need to do something within the 3 month. We're already a month in. So we've got 2 months to get something prepared, and that's not just comms, but that is solutions around the data we're collating. But again, you know, that if anybody's got anything, I'm quite happy for people to contact me, and I'll share what we're going to put together.
But equally, that's exactly why we're doing these roundtables, so that you know, everyone in this room is involved in some way within energy, within social housing, and so it's, if we can get, as you said earlier, Mike, it's getting that collective voice together. Housing is amazing at making change. It's an amazing sector at coming together when a platform comes together to do so. So I really hope that everyone who's on the call today, I've got everyone's name apart from iPad, apologies. So I've got everyone else's name, and if you can come together, then let's make that voice bigger. And certainly if anyone wants to say hello, I'm going to be at the Housing 2022. It is 2022, isn't it? Don't know, I can't get my dates right, in a couple of weeks. I'd love to chat to you more. I'm just going to bring in, as I say, Ollie Gray, based on the point you've made there about Charis. So Ollie, can you just explain a little bit more about what that involves, if you'd be happy to?
Sure. Hi everybody. So I'm Ollie Gray. I work for Charis. I'm really new at Charis. I've been here a month, so I just thought it was quite interesting. So Charis, we manage funds on behalf of energy sector, housing associations, and charities, and we provide support in terms of payments and also fuel vouchers, food vouchers, and furniture white goods. So that's essentially what we do. But one of the schemes that I've been thinking about at the moment. So where we work with the energy sector on sort of industry initiatives, so things like administering warm home discount schemes on behalf of E.ON, others that I'm forgetting to remember at the top of my head. You know, so we manage those schemes, and Ofgem really like the Park Home scheme. So Park Homes are sort of like almost like temporary homes where people don't have a direct relationship with the energy supplier. It's sort of managed for them. And I suppose when Dan was talking about managing that relationship in terms of his residents, I suppose I thought that was quite interesting, because what Ofgem really like this scheme. So where people living in park homes don't have that relationship, but we've been able to administer a scheme where they get £150 payment. It's an industry initiative, so it's funded by the energy sector. But I just wonder if there's something we could do in terms of learning from that process that we might be able to apply to social housing residents if they're in that sort of situation. It was just a thought, really, but I'm happy to have a conversation offline about that.
No, that's really interesting, and that's something that you found the energy, like the Ofgem themselves, have really backed.
Well, yes, Ofgem like it. The energy companies themselves perhaps less so, because their funding isn't necessary. So the other funds we administer, like financial assistance payments, the money goes to, so they could give say £150 payment, which should go to their own customers and pay off their own bills. So the money sort of recycles itself back to them. Whereas with the Park Home schemes, they can't necessarily guarantee that their own customers will benefit. But certainly the regulators really like the scheme. And it might be something that we could, if we've got housing associations that are interested in that sort of scheme, we could speak to Ofgem or Bays about it and see if there's something that could be developed there.
Well, like you say, it's another partnership networking. If the sector came together and kind of said, right, well, we know this Park Home scheme is running, how do we collectively make this more available? Then there's so many, you know, and I know Dan's mentioned now, obviously some of their homes are that way, but temporary accommodation is always a difficult one to manage for exactly that reason.
Yeah.
Really interesting. Thank you, Ollie. And certainly, you know, so you've mentioned there that Charis are supporting housing associations, mainly within, you know, like you said, like furniture and fuel poverty tradition, and then do quite a new piece for yourselves.
No, so well, we've been doing it for a few years now. So we have essentially we have a shop platform, and housing association. I think some of the people on the call are actually using us, and it's so they can, if you've got sort of hardship funds that you're managing on behalf of your residents, you can upload the funds onto the shop platform. It's 24/7 access, and then we can provide residents with fuel vouchers, cash vouchers, furniture, white goods, and food vouchers. And the way that the vouchers work is on a sort of SMS or email. So as soon as that's sort of checked out, essentially, of the shop, the client would get an email or an SMS, within a minute, that they can take to a pay point or a post office to redeem. So it works really well. The fuel vouchers where people on prepayment meters, because that can just be paid straight onto their account and they get credit.
Brilliant.
We're also working on a solution for smart meter customers as well, with the prepayment meters being phased out in the next couple of years. So it's a really straightforward platform, and it helps to really break down some of the admin burden around getting assistance to people really quickly when they need it.
But it's also about the knowledge gaps, and I think that's sometimes where people fall short. It's kind of it's not even knowing some of that funding is even available in the first place. So thank you, Ollie. Really, really appreciate the overview. Michelle Johnson's put into the chat there that they've already started to educate tenants, or she's assisting with their energy to make sure they put the £650 aside, as well as any other grants from the government as the cold weather comes in. I've been trying to ask how they've been managing the grant, as there are many people that will ask for help towards fuel and food on a regular basis, which at Bourneville Village Trust, we have a spreadsheet to monitor such tenants. The tenants I've spoken to, they have taken on board the advice. So has anybody else started to kind of engage with this and finding that, I don't know, are tenants being receptive to it? Are they not really engaging? How are people finding in terms of, with grants being released, that how are people finding tenants are engaging with that?
I'm just going to throw in one thing there. So there's so many grants that I think a lot of people don't really understand what they're going to get. There's disability payment of 150. There's the £400 on your electric that everybody's going to get. There's the £650 payment for those on benefits. So I think there's a need for an education piece, simply just to let people know what to expect. And that can obviously help them budget for the winter. But I agree, there's definitely a piece of work to be had. That is, you're going to get this money, it's going to come in with your benefits on a particular month, but you need to be putting that aside for your energy bills. Absolutely.
Completely agree. And I think there's definitely a conversation to be had there around evidently how that's marketed. Natalie, let me bring you in. Nice to have you with us today.
Yeah. Hi, thanks for having me on board. I wanted to ask something. So we know in the past, when the government gives out, I want to say, use the term handouts in terms of benefits to to people that actually need it, a lot of the times, eventually they are having to pay it back. Now, is there anything in the schemes or all the funding that is currently provided, is there any loopholes that eventually those people that are claiming those benefits, will they have to pay them back at some point, or will that be added onto the taxpayers, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I don't know. I think part of that might come down to who's in government in a few years' time. If I'm just putting there's a couple of smirks there, so I'll take that
I think the 400 and the 650 payments aren't to be paid back. So the £400 that are going to the energy bills, they've said this won't be clawed back in future payments from people. So this is kind of a gift, I suppose. The £400, which is funded by taxpayers. Same with the one-off 650 payments. I don't believe that needs to be paid back.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jonathan.
Brilliant. Well, at least that was my understanding too. I mean, evidently we don't know what cuts might come in the future, but certainly at the moment that seems to be. But then, like I say, if we look at it on the flip side, there have been that many cuts to welfare benefits and things over the last few years that actually, ironically, this money they should have already had in the first place. Just going back to Michelle's point from earlier, Michelle Johnson from Bourneville Village Trust. Andrea, brilliant. Let's bring you on board. Always nice to see a hand pop up. I'd like to force the conversation unless I have to.
I was just wondering, has anybody had any experience of people sort of abusing things like fuel vouchers and stuff? Just I ask because in a previous role, I worked for a groundwork, and you know, there was a Green Doctor service, and part of that service was we had some Charis vouchers that we could distribute, and there was a lot of it wasn't very easy to monitor, basically. So, you know, people were saying things, you know, they wouldn't send us pictures of their meters and things. The phone didn't work, the camera didn't work, and then you'd get several calls from the same number, and it was a different story or too similar a story. Like, it was just really hard. You know, it got to the situation where I was telling my staff to give the vouchers out because the risk of that sort of not giving a voucher out and the impact of that would be much worse than somebody selling it on or whatever. So I was just wondering, sort of since then, is there any other procedures in place that sort of just helps make sure that the grants go to those who are most in need?
Well, I mean, I think Dan Welch was just fastest there ahead of Graham, but I think you've got a really interesting point there because Michelle's immediately said that she's dealing with that right now. So Dan, I'll pass over to you first and then I'll bring Jonathan in.
Yeah, no worries. I presume you mean the hacked vouchers. So my last role was with Anchor, another housing association, and I was ordering the vouchers for our residents that had prepayment meters. The truthful answer to that is there's not much of a check from 2 points of view. So all that you're giving hacked is somebody's postcode and first line of address. But I'm sure there'd be an easy way for them to persuade their neighbour to say that they've got a prepayment meter, contact us and get vouchers, and then, you know, end up with double the amount of vouchers. So there's some of that going on. Also, though, that lots of people that have prepayment meters don't necessarily know the vouchers exist. So does it target the right people? Is it a level playing field? I'm not sure everyone's aware that the vouchers are actually there as well. So that's probably another point to bear in mind.
And again, that's your marketing and media teams, isn't it? And making sure, and again, you know, go back to what Andrea said earlier, that if their teams are going out now to speak directly to the tenants who are already in arrears, making them aware of it and what they need to do is absolutely key. So couldn't agree more with you there, Dan. Jonathan, let me bring you in.
Yeah, so we had this conversation with my team. One of my teams is the income team, who I think they get quite cynical being income officers because they're always often dealing with people who are in arrears, and they always feel that they're trying not to pay their rent or they're trying to get out of paying their rent. So when we launched the Charis vouchers scheme, it was like, well, you know, will they just abuse it? Will they, you know, what they're going to buy with the vouchers? Are they going to? We buy white goods for people as well, if on occasion, if you know, if their washing machine breaks down and they can't afford to replace it, you know, we will purchase a washer for them rather than basically them not pay their rent so they can go out and buy a new washing machine. So there was those conversations around whether someone might get a new washer and then sell it and just then take, you know, £150 and spend it on whatever. But I think what we'd said was, you may well get some of that, but it should be small scale. You're always going to get some people that are going to try and abuse the system, but largely most customers are fine. Most customers pay their rent. You know, overwhelming majority pay their rent. Overwhelming majority are very good, nice tenants, nice people. They will, you know, use the vouchers for what they're intended. So we didn't feel that it was worth building in loads of different checks to make sure that they've spent the money on X, Y, and Z when, you know, vast majority probably will. So we just run with it. We issue the vouchers, and, you know, hopefully they use them for what they're intended, really.
And I think part of that will come down to the education piece of making people aware of why you're telling them to keep it for this, because actually, look, yes, you can go and enjoy it in whatever way now, but if you don't do this, then in 6 months you probably will lose your home because you won't be able to afford it. And it's that, again, it comes down to, I think it's really, really important at the moment. And I really liked what Andrea said earlier about it now being that, and obviously what Mike has shared, and obviously I know Dan had to shoot, but what Dan was showing earlier, this idea that actually now was the time to make sure your relationships with your tenants are stronger than ever, so that you have those consistent lines of communication and they know what's available, because we're in for a tough 6 months. It's literally going to get harder, you know, post September, October, it starts to get colder, and then these bills go up. We're going to be in some trouble. Ollie, let me bring you in.
Just a quick one on that point around vouchers being used for what they're intended. So with our fuel vouchers, the resident would get that, would have that email. They'd take on their mobile or text on their phone. They take that to the pay point with their energy key, and the voucher is just credited to that straight onto their meter. So there's that. So with the fuel voucher, there's no way it can be spent on anything other than fuel. We also do cash vouchers and food vouchers, but even with the food vouchers, we can limit what that's used for, so they can't buy, fireworks, alcohol, lottery, those sorts of things. So there are ways in which it can be done.
Could the individual not just forward the text message on to somebody else though?
Yeah, good question.
Like for less, sell it to somebody essentially and forward the message on, and then have the cash. I just had concerns that it might fuel other problems.
Tenants, clearly, Andrea.
my colleague Matt's put his hand up, and he might have the answer to that question if he doesn't mind coming.
Matt, let me bring you in.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to say on that point, the actual voucher will be to a named individual, and that individual's name will need to match up with the name on the prepayment card or meter. So in terms of forwarding that on to somebody else, that wouldn't be able to be done.
Oh, there you are. Solutions.
Good to know.
No, thanks, Matt. The question there actually from Mike in the chat. Again, if there's anything you want to bring up, and where we're into kind of the last 10 minutes here, but he said, is anyone using or intending to use data science in homes, mainly around heat and humidity sensors? Now, again, this goes back, I guess, to the point we had earlier, Mike. And it's one of my biggest frustrations was that I think when so much work went on with EWI works, and EWI was everything that anyone was talking about, the problem you then got actually was damp and mold, and not enough education was done there on kind of the damp and mold follow-ups, and actually it created more issues up for a lot of people maybe than it solved. And so is this something you're doing then with heat and humidity sensors at the moment, or is it something you're looking to implement?
So it's something we're looking to implement very soon with a company called Invisible Systems. But they do have it, and the reason I was asking this is not so much around we're looking at a condensation, damp and mold primarily, but the heat or excessive heat and excessive cold is the bit that I think we might start looking at around the energy part and the underheating of homes towards the winter. So we think it may have some benefit of bringing that in. But they also can put an application directly onto the meter to see how many kilowatt hours are being used on energy as well. So that will then indicate when people are dropping into fuel poverty very quick. So yeah, I just wondered if, I know Yorkshire Homes have done something, and I know Home Group have done something. I just wondered if anybody else is looking at that. And again, when we launch it, if anybody's interested in looking at how we do that, I'm quite happy again to share the data, but it will be a stretch data. So it's going to be a 12-month learning around what that looks like, but certainly then introducing archetypes and then moving into that, what you just mentioned, what type of insulation levels it's got, what heating systems it's got. Again, I think we're going to move into data science a lot more into the housing sector, and not so much an IoT, but probably more AI. So we're looking at AI systems where that can actually run the home, not the customer, and get the best benefit of carbon reduction and heat into the home as well, from an energy perspective. But again, it's all kind of out there thinking at the moment. But if anybody is doing anything, and they're pleased, do share, and I'm quite happy to share back.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And actually, Dan has mentioned that Orbit have switched. We have Switchy installed in some properties, which is smart thermostats. So it doesn't know an awful lot about it, but it makes sense to see if we could use that data to identify homes that aren't heating adequately.
Yeah, I think it's just good to share, really. We're all trying to get the carbon reduction piece done, but again, we just got that crossover, that up over of increasing energy costs, and then this KPI around carbon reduction.
I don't quite know how that balance is going to work.
No, I don't think it does.
I think at the moment the focus has got to be make sure people can, you know, have a warm house and somewhere to live. Like, I think everything else is going to have to just follow.
Well, we're actually saying we're making quite a bold step. You know, they're going to heat. You know, customers or occupiers are going to heat, eat, or pay the rent. So it's going to be a fine balance of how they divide the pound. And again, you know, wherever it gets impacted, and I think it was Jonathan or somebody was saying earlier, you know, increase in rents by 3 or 4%, service charges are going up in some areas by 60%. You know, it's just impact. And again, I think, you know, the occupiers will just, or customers will just divide the pound up.
Unfortunately so. And I think, you know, it didn't help that for years there was that enforced, you know, 3 years, 1% reduction, you know, 3 years on the bounce. And now suddenly housing associations are having to recoup costs somewhere. And unfortunately, it's hitting the customer, which is the only people they're not trying to hit. Michelle's mentioned, actually going back to the earlier point we had there, that whilst you could evidently try and, you know, manipulate the vouchers in whatever way, you know, it's going to be logged on the system. So there will be questions raised by the housing team if that does happen. And I guess it tells you a lot about kind of the trust there with the relationship with the tenant. And where we've only got a few minutes left, is there any kind of final points people want to make? So I never want these to run over too much, because I know many people are probably looking at it going, I've got a 12 o'clock and I want to get a cup of tea. In the world of online teams, etc. No, I think we're good.
Matt, all I've said, I've dropped that presentation in that I've done. If anyone wants to have a look at it, I mean, look, it's very, very high level, but it was just kind of looking at the impacts, potential impacts of what would happen with all the factors, not just the energy coming in. So I've dropped it in. Look, it's very high level.
I download it, Mike. So do forward it over to me as well.
Okay.
I'll ping it.
Yeah. Look, you know, it wasn't for wider consumption, but I'm quite happy to share it with people. This is what I sent to our exec at Bromford and said, you've got a problem coming. You need to look at this. So yeah, I'm quite happy to ping that across, Matt.
Brilliant. And as Dan has mentioned there, he's going to be at Housing 2022 as well. He'll be there day 1 and 2, as will I, Dan. So I'll definitely be coming over to say hello. And yeah, if anyone else would like to say hello, please do. On that, just a quick update regarding kind of roundtables and what's happening with those. I say thank you everyone who came today, and I will make sure you're all connected and get something sent over. Next week, excuse me. Next week, we've got Jim Nixon, who, if anybody hasn't met him, runs a podcast called the Community Safety Podcast. He's going to be joining me to discuss homelessness and enforcement. And then after that, we will be having Bromsgrove District Housing Trust actually on the Thursday, so there's 2 next week, about establishing a local community EDI group for your social housing business. The reason we're doing 2 is because then we've got a live roundtable, my first ever live, so please show up, is the key thing, which is going to be the end of day 1 of Housing 2022. It's free to attend. There will be at least 1 or 2 drinks each available as well as a bribe. But basically, we're going to be looking at how do we engage that the next workforce for social housing? How do we engage young people with careers in social housing? How do we make sure that we make the sector as a whole more attractive to anybody? Because most people in this room will have fallen into it, will have discovered it by accident, will have just kind of stumbled into it in some way. How do we make it something that people want to look at? Because there's so many amazing opportunities for the sector. And if you work in it, you never tend to leave it. So how do we introduce that? Thank you, everybody who came today. Gavin Coleman's just thrown in the chat in there. The key area we're looking at is how to promote services and support to customers who do not traditionally fall into support groups. I think that's a really interesting point, both for this one and for future roundtables. And Gavin, I'll be taking that one with me to have potentially as a future roundtable point. Thank you very much for sharing that at the end. Thank you, everybody who came today. Like I say, I'll put something on LinkedIn for you all to connect with each other. If you have any questions at all, please reach out. And I look forward to seeing you all at a future roundtable. For now, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Really nice
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Matt.